Uh, I mentioned this earlier. If you're just joining us, there's a window for questions. If you have questions, just type it into the window. Those will show up on the screen there, and I'll answer those as best I can. I want to take a look quickly at the moving parts of the solution. There's a lot of confusion out there about how this solution works under the hood. I'm going to take a very, very simple view of how a piece of content comes out of the AX system, which is depicted in the upper left-hand corner. That's your imaging server. The AX client is then going to transmit that to a recipient, perhaps outside of our organization. And we'll look at how the IRM server interacts with the content and how the solution works at a high level. So to begin, the user retrieves the document in the normal fashion and then decides to share the content with an external user. At that point, a key is brought down through the AX client, and the content is encrypted. We do this through the IRM API. So the AX client knows how to talk to the IRM server, and it requests a key, which is dynamically generated, sent to the client, and the content is encrypted. At that point, a unique identifier is generated. I don't have it depicted on the slide, but the content is encrypted. That's represented by the lock, but a unique identifier is sent back to the IRM server, and it's stored along with the key and the policy that was applied to the document. So all that information is stored on the IRM server. You should note that the content itself is never stored on the IRM server. We simply store a fingerprint, the policy, the access controls, and some logging information, specifically an audit trail, and we'll talk about that. But the content right now is on the AX client. At this point, it can be attached to an email and sent to a recipient. Now, that recipient, they'll open the email, and they'll have a copy of that encrypted content. They can't do anything with it until they go to open it, at which point, if it's Adobe or Microsoft Word, that program will dial back to the IRM server, which will authenticate this recipient. It'll identify them, as maybe an authorized user, and at that point, a key is sent down to the recipient so they can decrypt the content and view the document. When the recipient closes the document, the key is destroyed. So at that point, the document is, it's always encrypted. But at that point, they could then forward the email to someone else, but that other recipient, they wouldn't be able to do anything with it because when they open it, they would dial back to the IRM server, and they wouldn't be able to view the content. So in this way, we can control access to the document. There's more information. If you look at a link at the bottom here, there's a link. And these slides, by the way, are available up on our eRoom site. I'll show you how to get into that if you're new to the TechShare. But at a high level, that's how it works. I want to pause for a second. If there's any questions, just type those into the window. I haven't seen any questions yet, so you're either all on board or you're completely bored and you just want to see the product, and we'll get there in a second. But before we do, take a second and look at scoping. So there's some very important questions you want to ask before you start to use this product. First, what are the policies? Huge question. Many organizations have an idea of how they want to secure content. They know what they can and can't do, say, pursuant to HIPAA. If you're in healthcare, people know what the requirements are around HIPAA. But then going a level beyond that and saying, well, how does that apply to this particular business process that we're engaged in? So if we have a process today where the provider needs to send certain medical records to the insurance company, how is that transmitted today? Maybe they have a portal and they're uploading documents and transmission secure. Maybe it's not. Maybe today they're emailing things, maybe they're password protecting a zip file, which is certainly not adequate because many of you know an email is like a postcard. Anybody can read it along the way. How should the policy be used? How and when should a user apply this protection policy? What kind of impact is that going to have on the customer's environment? What does it mean to the business process? Are users going to have to change how they do business, or is the solution going to be configured to handle the situation automatically for the user? In ApplicationXtender, we have the ability to automatically protect the content when it comes out of a particular application. What that means is that we may need to organize the information a little bit differently than it is being stored today in ApplicationXtender. Maybe we have to build a separate application. But all of these things need to be taken into consideration. And then finally, what kind of training works best for the user community? We want to think through things like education. We want to educate the users on the importance of an information security program, which is probably larger than simply sharing documents. There may be some things around being careful with printed copies of documents. Many companies have programs today so we can work within that existing framework to talk about how to handle digital content. Some companies don't have anything, so you really have to start from scratch. What's the role of your organization in helping companies educate users and sharing documents? And how are you going to do that? Are you going to create little videos that the users can watch, that kind of thing? Deployment is similar to many of the products. Deployment is straightforward enough. But you have to gather the detailed requirements, which would include things like policies. You want to establish those, agree with the business users. Hey, these are the policies. This is how it's going to be applied. Once you install the IRM server, you'll build and configure AX applications, or you'll configure the solution to work with existing applications, which is a supported feature. You'll train the users, and you'll test and validate results. So you'll actually have, I would argue, each user, practice by sending content, use the system, and that'll help, get the user sort of into the day-to-day operation of the system. In my experience, if you train users and they go off and they don't touch the solution for a couple weeks, they never are successful. They'll forget what you showed them in training, or they just won't use the tool. I've got a couple questions here. My friend Jeff McFarland wants to know, how does a remote user get the key if they don't have internet access during a period of time? I'm glad you asked that, Jeff. That's an important question. Let's consider for a second, I want to send a document to Jeff, and Jeff is going to be on the train at some point, and he wants to access the document. I send Jeff the latest price list for EMC software, and I protected it with IRM. So Jeff, you would have to open it while connected to the internet at least once. So we'd have to authenticate you at least once, and then we'll know who you are. And at that point, you're able to view the content. So consider, I send you the document right now, you open it, you look at it, things are hunky-dory, you close it, and then you're going to get on a train in about an hour. Now this is the scenario Jeff sort of describing. He's offline, he's on the train, but he wants to look at the price list because he has to finish that proposal he started earlier today. How does he do it? Well, within the IRM software, there's this notion of a lease. So you can configure within the policy a certain number of days a user may access the content while offline. So Jeff, in the case of the price list, we could configure a policy that says you're allowed to access the content for up to 3 days offline, but then you have to re-authenticate. You have to check back with the server again. This technique relies on that first point of access. We have to identify you at least once. But when you're offline, and that's a fairly typical scenario with a mobile workforce, we are able to cover that with the lease. So I hope that answers your question. Jeff, that helps Leah's a question. He says he is in the car on the highway and have internet access. That's because he has a Sprint card. So that's another option for you. Lee Turner's suggestion is to get a Sprint card, Jeff. If you just joined, there's another question here. Is it typical to install the IRM server outside the firewall? The Where you put the IRM server is very important. I think most IT departments these days will compartmentalize solutions. So we have the ability to install multiple IRM servers. You can have a front-end web server. I think in most small, medium-sized businesses, the IRM server would be installed in the internal network, and you'd simply open up a firewall port for that specific service. So you'll actually, during installation, you'll create a fully qualified domain name. It would be a publicly accessible address, and you'll specify a discrete port. By default, the IRM plugin communicates over 443. The reason it does that is because that port is open on most corporate firewalls outbound because it's the port that's used for SSL. But you can configure a discrete port, and in this way you can have an IRM server live within the corporate LAN and have it communicate with external users. External users would tunnel through that discrete port and do what they need to do around authentication and key transport and things of that nature. I hope that answers your question. Again, if you're just joining us, you can actually ask questions if you put them in the window there. I'll answer those as best I can. I think I've got everybody so far. And I'm going to move on here. So today's exercise, the little hands-on. I've got a walkthrough of the installation process. It takes about 90 minutes, from soup to nuts. And I borrowed a lot of information from the IRM admin guide. And that's a PDF file that is included with the installation. There's also, I want to mention, I think it's a 4-hour training class on the IRM solution. It's available from EMC, their MyLearn site. It's online, it's web-based, it's on demand, so you can watch it anytime. I actually went through the training a couple months ago. If I'm not mistaken, you can use MDF, that's market development funds that are provided to our partners to fund the training class. It's a couple $100, I believe. But you can use, I guess, EMC funny money to pay for that. You want to contact your channel manager to get more information on that. But in the exercise today, we're going to walk through everything you'll need to install a basic server and configure a basic policy to protect documents. But what I don't do is go through all the ins and outs of the IRM product. We just don't have the bandwidth to do that. It would be redundant with the EMC training. But there's a lot to this product, and I encourage you, if you want to take the next step, go to the MyLearn site and find out more about that training. I think Lee wanted to say something. Yeah. Nope. And yeah, let's move on. So the content is the exercise and the slides that we just went through are stored in the e-room.